Healing isn't always a straight line. Sometimes it throws you backwards when you least expect it. After 3 years with a trach, I finally got it out last year and I felt like I was getting my life back. But that was short-lived. In this deeply personal episode, I'm sharing what happened, why I look a little different, why the trach is back, and what this means for me. And stick around until the end because I'm trying something new that will not only hopefully help me, but also you.
Welcome to Navigating the Unknown with Nikki, a podcast in collaboration with React 19. Together we share stories, support, and hope for those living with vaccine injury and chronic conditions.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Navigating the Unknown with Nikki. This is a podcast in collaboration with React 19. And today's episode is a little bit different. It's just me, and it's very personal. If you've been watching the show, you probably noticed a new accessory on my neck in part of the last episode. That's right, my blowhole is back. But it was the result of a very scary medical emergency that could have been fatal. But I wanted to take an episode to address this update because I started this podcast with episode 1 by sharing my story. And now with this major change, it only felt right to come full circle and be real with you. So I want to start out with a general quick summary. And if you want more details, you can go back and watch episode 1. The link is in the description. That gives my full story between 21 right after my vaccine and everything that happened up until the beginning of 25. So with that being said, 21 in February, I had my second Moderna vaccine. Within 36 hours, I started having multiple issues. Started with respiratory stuff, went on to be neurological, cardiac, urinary, GI. I had a multitude of systems start to fail. My body was pretty much attacking itself. I had multi-systemic inflammatory response syndrome, and one thing after another started to fail. So I had feeding tubes, was on and off life support, in and out of the hospital, and this happened between 21 and 22. A few months after all this started, after my 5th hospitalization, when I went on the ventilator, they couldn't pull me off because I was starting to have these what they called laryngospasms where my throat would close off. So the only way to take me off the ventilator was to secure an airway with a trach. So I had the trach 21, 2, 3, and last year, 24, is when I had it out. But during that time, the first 2 years was up and down. It was a constant 2 steps forward, 3 steps back kind of thing. But then in 23, I saw a neurologist and was diagnosed with CIDP, chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy. And with that diagnosis, I was able to start receiving IVIG, immunoglobulin infusions, and I started that in August of 23. And that was basically supposed to help suppress the bad part of my immune system, the part that was attacking, the inflammatory part that was attacking the nerves in my body, and then also bring in supportive, good immune characteristics and antibodies to help combat that. And during that time, that would allow my body to start rebuilding and healing itself. It's not a cure, it's not a fix, and it wears off in between times. That's why I have to have it every 3 weeks. But since then, starting it, it has basically kept my body at bay to allow a lot of healing. So, like I said, 21 to 20, halfway through 23 was a up and down thing, more of a decline than anything overall. But then 23, starting out at the end, all the way up until 25, a constant state of improvement in which my baseline got better and better and better. I went from needing a wheelchair most of the time to only using one crutch most of the time. I went to having more endurance, no feeding tube, could tolerate food just fine with some issues and modifications. And then also breathing got better. I got to the point where I wasn't having these laryngospasms or throat closures, and I went about 2 years without any. So that's why we had decided in 24 that I was going to have the trach out for quality of life. They couldn't promise me it wasn't going to happen again. And that was a risk that I was willing to take. A little scary, but let me just tell you, when I had that trach out, it has been the most normal that I have felt since all of this began. Even though you get used to it, there is a certain level of discomfort and frustration and annoyance that you become accustomed to. As we all know, with any chronic conditions, we all have stuff going on constantly. So you've got that kind of background noise that's always there. So when I got that out, that was one more piece of that was gone. And so from April of 24 until April of this year, didn't have a trach. And it was amazing. But that leads me to what has happened recently. I'd gotten to the point where, like I said, I was improving and was able to go out, and recovery only meant like, half a day, maybe 2 days if I did a whole lot, but then I was back at my baseline. I didn't lose any of that ground before. And I was also at the point I was doing things physically, not only my own basic strengthening, but also was able to participate in wheelchair basketball, which was huge. It was ability for me to challenge myself in a way that was adapting to my limitations, my legs being the biggest limitations physically. But I was able to do it and hang with it. So in March, I had basketball tournaments. I had 2 weekends back to back, both 2 days each, where we had multiple games. And usually after the first few of the year, I recuperated a few days to a week, and I was back to normal, even with that strenuous level of activity. Well, I had those. And then the following week, I ended up going out to LA to the premiere of Follow the Silence, which was amazing. Do not regret. But after these 3 weekends in a row, when I came back and I was trying to recover, I noticed I wasn't recovering. Started to have more shortness of breath, wasn't getting that energy back, felt fatigued, a lot weaker, a lot more trouble getting around, and I started having laryngospasms. They were minor, meaning that they weren't closing my throat off completely, but I noticed changes in my voice. I noticed resistance and feeling, and that scared the crap out of me because I was afraid this is starting over again. So I went to my pulmonologist, and with this shortness of breath, they did some pulmonary function tests, and they found something that was a little bit alarming. They found that it wasn't asthma, which I do have. I've had that for years. And there wasn't any kind of thing that, you take a breathing treatment and it helped, because I did that and there was no change. Basically, the numbers were pointing to probable weakness in my respiratory muscles. And he had a feeling it had to be neurologically driven, since a lot of these other issues have been. So he was concerned about that. So I went to see my neurologist. They wanted some more workup to make sure that it wasn't respiratory related, cardiac related, that it was in fact neuro driven. So I was in the process of getting all these tests scheduled when that brings us to April. Still had at that point of decline. In April, I had woke up, I'd felt tired as I had been, but went on to church. And while I was there, I noticed I started feeling resistance. And when I say I feel resistance, it means like, you feel like you got something caught in your throat. And then it slowly progressed to the point of more resistance, to the point of I was having trouble breathing. So I stepped out of church, and at that point, it became very quickly apparent that I was having a major laryngospasm, or in the process. So I had somebody, they rushed me to the closest hospital, and they tried to give me different things to help relax it. They flew me out to a larger hospital, the one where my surgeon that did the trach and my ENT was. And from there, for the next few days, they battled back and forth of trying to give me medication that was muscle relaxers, sedatives, anything to help relax that spasm or open up that closure so I could breathe. They also did positive pressure through what's called a BiPAP. It was a mask that pressurized air, because a lot of times when you think of a muscle spasm or something like that, you put pressure on it and it'll help relax it as well. So that's what they were trying to do through that. And this would work for a little bit. And if I tried to come off the BiPAP or lower the medication, it returned. And it was a constant struggle. It was exhausting to try to force air basically through what felt like you're trying to breathe through a coffee stir, forcing the air up and down is already exhausting when you're are dealing with medical issues and weakness to begin with. So after, I guess it was maybe 3 days into this and not seeing any major headway, we had a discussion. And that discussion is where I decided, and the doctor, that the only way forward to secure and maintain this airway, especially without knowing how to treat what was going on, was a tracheostomy again. I was absolutely defeated. And this video right here is one where I was in the hospital discussing it right before I was having to go in for a tracheostomy. And it was a very difficult time. So on April 17th, I had my tracheostomy put in again, which was almost a year after I had gotten it taken out the first time. For 3 years prior to that, I had it. So, tracheostomy again. That should have cleared up everything. I was still having some resistance in the spasm, of course, but now I could breathe. There was no resistance, and the trach, the hole was below that, so I was able to breathe. But they also noticed at that point, once again, I was having issues with my blood gases. So you're supposed to have a certain amount of O2 and then CO2, and they're supposed to balance out. And if that balance gets off, it can cause um, things like acidosis and alkalosis. Basically, those are saying like your pH. And for me, I was getting the oxygen I needed, but I wasn't getting the CO2 out. So I was basically poisoning myself. And through this, if it wasn't addressed and they sent me home, eventually I ended up going into organ failure and death unaddressed. So that had to be addressed, and the trach should have fixed that if it was merely this causing it. So they did more pulmonary tests, and once again, these other doctors said, yeah, I think it's respiratory weakness, neurologically driven. We don't know what's going on, how to address it, but the only way that we can band-aid it for right now and be able to send you home safely until we can get you into a specialist that deals with this is to train me and put me on a ventilator at night. And for the first time, I've come home and I use a ventilator every night now, and it hooks up directly through my trach, and I know how to take it on and off, which has been a major adjustment. So until I get in to see a specialist, I'm going to see a pulmonologist that works with patients with neurological respiratory issues such as like ALS, because a lot of times those patients have issues where the respiratory muscles are starting to weaken, and that kind of pulmonologist is going to be the one seeing me. It doesn't mean I have ALS. It means that they're just used to working with patients with these issues. So hopefully I might get some answers. So basically from this hospital stay, I gained a hole in my throat to be able to breathe and keep that open airway. Even when I have these spasms, it comes and goes. And then also the ventilator to help get that CO2 out so I'm not poisoning myself. I'll come back to the ventilator, but I want to go back and talk about what I've been calling these laryngospasms. Actually, they're not that, or may not be that, maybe a combination of different things. So at the beginning, when all this started, they called it vocal cord dysfunction. They thought my vocal cords were not synchronized with breathing, and they were closing when they were supposed to open and opening when they were supposed to close. And so it was causing what they thought was restriction that way. They don't occur all the time, or I wouldn't be able to talk and do this. They come and go. And there's no rhyme or reason and very little warning. Sometimes they can start from nothing to full-blown closure within 15 minutes up to a few hours, and they can last for an hour all the way up to multiple days. So very serious if I didn't have the trach to be able to breathe below that closure. And then as things progressed and I started having more, they sent a scope down to look at it again when I was having one. This time the doctor saw what she called, looked more like dystonia, where my larynx was like, my breathing tube up here was like collapsing and withering down and constricting. And so she's like, that's definitely neurological driven. I don't know what's causing it. No answers there so far. But then recently, with this hospital stay in April, they did 2 or 3 scopes, and each time they saw something different. The first time they visualized and they said the vocal cords were open, it was during a time of relaxation, and of course nothing was wrong. And anatomically, everything looks great inside, so there's nothing anatomically wrong with it. It's physiologically and functionally. So when I was starting to flare up and have more, and it wasn't relaxed, they sent a scope down. And this time they showed that I was having a laryngeospasm and my vocal cords were closed. So obviously laryngeospasm, vocal cord dysfunction all together. And then when my ENT looked at it the last time, she saw something new that I had never been told, nor had they seen before. At this point, she said that I was having circumferential, which means all around, closure of the velopharynx. So little technical terms here. Velopharynx is anywhere between like your nose and right below your mouth. This is kind of the upper part. And so you think, well, if it's closing there, above where my nose is, I can breathe out my mouth. No. Actually, where it was closing, she saw is right below the base of my tongue. So right below the base of my tongue, she saw that it was actually had collapsed down. And she said she has never seen this while someone is awake. She said it actually looks like I'm having sleep apnea while awake. So if somebody has sleep apnea, everything kind of collapses, you lay down, it relaxes. But as soon as you wake up, it opens up. For some reason, mine has started to collapse and it's not reopening. So she is definitely convinced once again it's neurologically driven, and she has no idea. And that's why she wants me to further follow up with other specialists to see if I can find answers. But until then, she's a wonderful doctor. She's real with me in the fact that the only thing she can do is provide me an open airway and help maintain this trach. And she's done just that. And she's been there for me. And so I love her for it. Now, back to the vent. So you're like, okay, I've seen people on the ventilator in the hospital. How does this work at home? Obviously, because I have a trach, there's not a tube that goes down my throat. There is a tube that is in my neck, and it stays in there. And at night, what I do is I hook up the actual ventilator to here. So let me show you my home setup of ventilator. This right here is my ventilator. It's on a stand, and this is the machine, and this is what we call the humidification, because when you breathe through your nose and your mouth, it humidifies the air and it's not as dry. And so with the trach, it goes directly into your trachea. And so there's no humidification. And then for the machine, I just turn it on. And when I turn it on, the respiratory therapist has already set up the settings. So I don't have to change the settings at all. She adjusts them as needed, and then my doctor can give her guidance to help adjust them if I'm retaining CO2 more, or if it's not doing its job, or if I'm having difficulty with tolerance. We did a lot of adjustments at first, but now it's pretty much the same every night. I just turn it on, and then all I've got to do is make sure that it is connected to my trach. This right here is what is in my throat right now. This one is a cuff trach. I do have uncuffed and cuffed trachs. At night, I have to use the cuff trach. Sometimes during the day, and most of the time during the day, I use the uncuffed trach because it doesn't have this little, see that little balloon? It's deflated right now, but you can kind of still see it still causes some resistance of air. And the only way that I'm able to talk is I get air and I push it up through that. And when I push it up through that, it goes up through my vocal cords and I'm able to talk. Of course, if I was having one of these throat closures, spasms, whatever they are, I wouldn't be able to talk because air wouldn't go up through my vocal cords. So I use one that's uncuffed. So this isn't a barrier and resistance to being able to talk. But also, if you notice that I've got this right here, see that right there? It's a close-up view of it. This is what is called my passing mirror. Passing mirror is a speaking valve. And so basically all I do is I can put it right on there and that allows me to talk. So let me explain. If I were to take this off, you're going to hear the difference of me talking. The reason for this. And the reason for this difference is because it's basically, this is a one-way valve. So it's allowing air to be sucked in for me to use, but it's closing and not allowing air out, because when I have this out, all the air that I'm pushing up through my lungs is coming out here instead of going up through my vocal cords. So it's a lot harder to talk, makes me really dizzy. I can use my finger to occlude it, but this is a passing mirror. But back to the trach. So the trach, when I have the cuffed version on at night, it has that balloon down there. And then this right here is where I put the air through it to blow up this balloon. So let me see if I can show you. So I take this little syringe and I usually put about 5 cc's of air in it. Sometimes I'll do a little bit less because it's a little uncomfortable when it's inflated, and you don't want to have it too inflated or it can cause damage to the actual trach with that prolonged pressure. I put it in there and then I'll blow this up. And when I blow it up, you can see that balloon inflates. I can do it even more and show you the full capacity of it. So right there. And the balloon is inflated. And that right there, the reason for it is because when it's in my trach, it creates a seal. Just like if you were on the ventilator at the hospital, you've got to have that seal because the air coming in through it and through the ventilator and down, it forces it to go into my lungs and it doesn't allow it to come back up through my nose and my mouth. So to take it out, all I do is I just pull the air out of it. It deflates and then I can remove it and put in my other trach if I want to, or leave it just like that. So with a ventilator, all I do is take my flexible hose and I attach it directly to my trach. I turn on the ventilator and it is ready to go after I've inflated my cuff, of course. Now, let me just tell you, I was already experienced with the trach. I knew what to expect. Didn't make it tons easier, but a little bit easier. Knowing what to expect is a huge thing. And dealing with it a second time was a little easier than dealing with it a first time. But this ventilator was so difficult because being on and off the ventilator, especially the first 2 years, 6 different times between 21 and 22 or 3, 6 different times, it caused a lot of medical trauma. And when I say that, I mean I had a lot of PTSD. That if you've ever been on a ventilator and been coherent, which I had requested to be coherent as much as possibly that I could tolerate because I wanted to be a part of my medical care. So you have to really, it's a big mental battle because if you notice a lot of people on ventilators, they have the restraints because naturally, what do you want to do? You want to pull that tube out. You feel like somebody is strangling you. Even though that's the thing keeping you alive and giving you air, it literally feels like you're being strangled. And so you have to mentally calm yourself down to be able to relax enough to take that air in and out and let it blow up your lungs and deflate your lungs. Same thing with the ventilator. Yes, I don't have a tube down my throat, so it's a little less uncomfortable, but this balloon that I just showed you inflated. And when it inflated, I still felt that pressure. And that pressure was like PTSD for me. I felt like I was back on the ventilator, and there was several times I would fall asleep and then wake up in pure panic thinking I was back to that beginning where I was on the ventilator in the hospital, and I didn't get much sleep at all. I've gotten to the point where I can sleep 4 to 6 hours on good nights. Sometimes I do a few hours at a time, take a break, get a few hours back on. It's been a learning process, so it's been hard. But anyway, it's keeping my blood gas levels okay and me out of the hospital. I hope you like this education. As being a physical therapist, I feel like education's huge, and it's been a huge part of my journey and learning to cope and deal with everything and empower me to take control of my health is by understanding. So I wanted just to share some of these things because there are so many questions and people don't know about trachs and ventilators very much. So just sharing my personal experience of what I've learned and had to deal with. So a lot of people ask, well, why can't you use a CPAP or a BiPAP? So BiPAPs, that video that I had mentioned earlier about when I was in the hospital and what they were using to help break up the spasm was a BiPAP. And so the BiPAP is like this, it's like a CPAP amplified. And so it causes a lot of pressure and it helps with that. So CPAP, you have to, initiate the breath and it has some, pressure, positive pressure to help you breathe. But then a BiPAP has even more so. So why did they not put me on a BiPAP? Because you technically can hook it up to your trach, which the machine I have can do CPAP settings, BiPAP settings, or ventilator settings. I'm using it on ventilator settings. And the reason for that is because what they noticed after I had the trach, when they were monitoring me, I was stopping breathing. And so if I just had obstructive sleep apnea, then it should have been fine with the trach because there's nothing obstructing it. It's below it. But I was actually stopping breathing at night. And so in order to combat that, along with, that ability not to get the air in and out, because I was having this respiratory weakness, they chose the ventilator because the ventilator has a backup mode. And when I stop breathing, not taking those breaths in or out, it kicks in and it makes me breathe. So it is an assistive factor. So ventilator can do that. And then also, not only does it assist with the inhalation, which I was getting the oxygen, but it assists with the exhalation as well. And so that was a major issue for me. I wasn't expelling that CO2. So they needed to get the ventilator to help assist me in expelling that CO2. So with that being said, I have to do that every night until we can figure out what's going on or my body decides to get its butt in gear and work. I don't know. But it is an adjustment, something I'm learning to deal with. So what does this mean for me now? Going forward, obviously, there's been a lot of struggle physically, medically, and that in itself is a complete battle. But as we know, and I've always preached, there's a mental side, a psychological, emotional side to this, and that has been one of the hardest battles that I've had to face, and that a lot of you all have to face. Whenever you have a setback, not only is it challenging physically and medically, but the realization that everything you had worked towards and where you had gotten now was just stripped away from you. All that hope, and looking forward to, hey, I'm improving and the newfound place that you're at and less limitations now is just gone. And so with each setback, it's harder and harder, especially, for me, the up and down battle those first few years. And it was like, okay, I'm doing good. I'll start to do bad again. And it was always deflating, but it's been even more so for me lately because I literally went 2 years with a gradual up and down, but gradual overall improvement or at least maintenance at a level where I had limitations, but my quality of life was much improved to where I was. And so I always looked for that, as I say, the piano to fall out of the sky because that's what I was used to. But the further it got out, the less anxiety and anticipation I had about, hey, this isn't going to last, the further away it got from my mind. So when this hit me unexpectedly and how quickly and where it took me back to has been a very hard thing for me. So you'll notice that I've been doing these podcasts and I've kept releasing them here in the last few months. My secret is I had pre-recorded a lot of these episodes and all I was doing was editing them in the meantime and just releasing them. So I kind of looked like everything was good and everything was normal. And if you didn't catch that video that I released where I was in the hospital and I did that quick update, you may have not known anything was going on, but I've kind of been in the background coping and dealing medically, physically, but also mentally trying to figure out how to go forward with this, especially when I'm supposed to be the one on here trying to inspire you all to keep going when I didn't feel like getting out of bed myself. But I've had to do a lot of self-talk and trudging through pity parties and mental health. But it's somewhere that some of us, we hang out for a little bit, but I try not to stay because it can take me further and further downhill. And so I know obviously I've got to keep going one day after a time. I've got 3 kids that need me. One's going off to college this year. Other 2 are in high school and they need their mom. Yeah, they're more independent, but they still need their mom. And so I've got to keep pushing and you've got to do what you've got to do. But not only that, to know each day you've got to wake up and put your big girl panties on and do the best you can, but also dealing with the fact that I was so close. I was approaching that point where I was talking with my doctor about the possibility of trying to return to like a non-clinical job in physical therapy versus a clinical job. I couldn't do that. I was still limited there safely. But I was approaching that level at which I was considering by the end of this year, they were going to release me to go to an actual non-clinical role. And so I was thinking, oh, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to be able to return to work. I'm going to have more financial income, a lot less stress, and everything is going great. And so when this happened, those were a lot of the thoughts that I had in my head thinking, that carrot that was so close that I could just see and smell and taste was now just ripped away. And that was another hard aspect and realization through this of just something that was a goal of mine personally that I thought was almost achievable at that point. Now it didn't seem achievable. So I spent a lot of time in bed in recovery. I'm just trying to build up some of the basic strength just from the hospital stay, much less the decline. But through this, did a lot of self-reflection. And so this brings us to the next thing I wanted to talk about. That thing I promised you that was exciting, a new thing, a venture that was not only something that I was super excited about, but hopefully may even bring you something special too. This is that part of the video. Now, let's talk about what's next and what I'm creating out of this chaos. As you can imagine, getting the trach back means traditional work is out of the picture for me right now. Between the home ventilator, the trach, the IVIG infusions, the daily juggling, act of managing this setback, along with everything else, I had to face the truth. The path I was on to return to work just isn't realistic right now. So, with all the extra time in bed recovering, I've been deep in thought. A lot. Frustrated, angry, sad, you name it. Honestly, it felt like everything I had fought to rebuild was being burned to the ground overnight. But I knew if I stayed in this headspace, I'd start to spiral. I had to start bucketing the water out of my sinking ship or risk going down with it. So I held on to what I could do. I held on to this podcast and this passion to help others like you, because I knew that a part of me still had purpose, but I also had to grieve the plans I was so close to seeing through, that being returning to my job. And then somewhere in that grief, in between the sheets and the breathing tubes and all this craziness, I had a light bulb moment. So I was just laying there, and all of a sudden, mentally, I was yelling, plot twist. I wasn't giving up. I was changing direction, not because I had to abandon the goal of returning to work, but because there might be another way to reach it. And that's when I came up with this idea, and I'm really excited about. I'm launching a print-on-demand shop, and it's going to be called Invisible Warriors. So this shop, it's going to be built for people like me, like you, those navigating vaccine injury, chronic illness, and those invisible daily battles that most can't see. You might be wondering, what's a print-on-demand store? Well, it's a way of using a third-party printer to bring your designs to life without needing the money to invest in the beginning up front. Because let's be real, when you're chronically ill, your pockets aren't exactly lined with gold, or even loose change for that fact. So I'll be designing everything myself, pulling from my own journey as an invisible warrior, vaccine injured with chronic illness. I'm going to design things that are bold, funny, raw, and very real. So when someone places an order, a third party prints it and ships it, so I don't have to worry about holding all the inventory, managing shipping, while I'm, trying to stay alive over here. So I've spent days watching YouTube tutorials and teaching myself how this works, because if you're stuck in bed, you might as well find a way to turn that time into something hopeful and creative, right? So we're kicking things off with t-shirts, but I plan to expand to basically anything I can print truth and sarcasm on. So let's talk about designs. So this is the part that I think you're all gonna like. As you can probably guess, finding vaccine injury related merchandise is like finding a doctor who actually believes you and is gonna do something. Nearly impossible. So I thought, who better to create this stuff than someone who's actually living it? Let's be real. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger? No. More like what doesn't kill you gives you a wicked sense of humor and a master's degree in sarcasm. And that's exactly the vibe of these designs. Funny, raw, sometimes a little spicy, but always relatable. So themes will include obviously vaccine injury, but in general, chronic illness, gaslighting in medicine, government, big pharma, and the reality of conditions such as POTS, MCAS, EDS, brain fog, chronic fatigue, GI dysfunction, and tons more. Some designs are about pure advocacy or awareness, while others are comebacks and that sassy sarcasm I promised you. And then some are just hilarious because, let's face it, humor is my strongest coping tool, and I bet a lot of you all do that because why not laugh when it's better than crying? I'll be honest with you, I was kind of hesitant to share this at first on here. It's easy to worry people will think you're just trying to make a buck. But if you're like me, resources are thin. And beyond selling what little you have or asking for help, there aren't many options left before you start losing the basics. And as a strong, independent woman, single mom, you can't give up. And I had to find a new way. But this store is more than a possible income for me. It's advocacy, and it's a way that I can still find another avenue of purpose and achieve the goals. It's a connection. It's saying, I've been there, I see you, you matter. And so what better way than to make yourself visible with things that are relatable to your life, that express what you're living, that so many can't see. So go check out the link in the description and go see the store, browse the designs. I bet you'll find something that fits your journey to a T. And if you don't buy anything, that's okay too, because I promise you, you're still gonna get a good laugh scrolling through it. Another thing, if you go to my store and you find a design you like, maybe even gives you a laugh, or found one that is your favorite, write it in the comments below. Tell me, because it's gonna help me produce better and more designs like that. I've poured so much of myself into this. My story, my humor, my creativity, every bit of energy I have. And I hope it brings value to you just as it's already given me something as far as purpose and a possible avenue of a non-traditional source of income by providing a product to you that actually has meaning, and is from somebody that gets it. So to wrap this up, I may have a new hole in my neck, but I'm still me. I may have had a setback, but I'm not starting over. I'm starting again with more grit, more perspective, and a deeper purpose than I've ever had before. And as my shirt says, and I'm back. Let's face it, if I popped up in this episode with a fresh hole in my neck and I didn't say anything, I think a few of you might have noticed and been scratching your heads. But like I said, I'm not that same woman back in 2021 who went through this for the first time. I'm stronger, I'm more resilient, and a lot less naive. This time, I've also got community like you. I've got knowledge, tools, boundaries, and of course, humor, and a voice that is now louder and bolder and more determined than ever, despite this maybe limiting me some. I'm going to keep on using this platform, this podcast, and now my new brand, Invisible Warriors, to keep bringing awareness and inspiration to people like us living this same battle every day. Because let's be real, there are a lot of us out there. We're the redheaded stepchildren, the medical misfits, the ones who don't exist, been dismissed, silenced, or sidelined. And it's time we had a way to be seen and heard loud and clear. And that's what this podcast and hopefully this new brand is all about, telling our truth and wearing it proudly. So whether it's a Sick and Savage t-shirt or something that screams, we are here, we exist, and this is real, and this is the battles that we're facing daily. That's what I want you all to have. Healing is not linear, and I'll keep saying that. And for many of us, it doesn't even mean recovery in the way we once thought. It means learning to dance in the rain, or realistically, for some of us, learning to lie down and smile in it. But it means adjusting our expectations, but never dimming our fire. Don't miss the next episode. I'll be hosting a Canadian filmmaker who just released a brand new documentary following the story of a man injured by the vaccine. What this filmmaker did is he not only told the story of this guy that was vaccine injured, but along the way he uncovered some truths that will shock you, and you do not want to miss it. So hit the subscribe button, tap the notification bell, make sure you're on my email list. Link is in the description below, because I've got that special coupon for you if you purchase anything. And also we'll send out emails if you're on my list as far as new products that I've come up with, because this is something I'm going to be continually releasing new ones. And most importantly, thank you. Thank you for still being here, for supporting me, for listening, because we're on this wild journey together and we're surviving one day at a time, no matter how messy it gets. This isn't the end of my story, just like it's not the end of yours. It's just a new chapter. And the same goes for you. No matter what setback, it's always a chance for a different new beginning. So hang in there. And the next time life throws you a curveball or you hit a setback, don't panic. Remember, just like I did, yell plot twist and just keep swimming. Just like Nemo, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. I know, a little corny, but I will see you in the next episode.